Welcome to another scintillating show on Rising Above Shadows of Abuse. Rasa. I'm your host, Grace Ovba. Today I have the adorable and compassionate Lisa Marie Anzaldua. How can a survivor of abuse manage ongoing traumatic relationship, stress, or disentangle from relationships with narcissistic individuals, considering the body, mind, and spirit?
How can somebody who's experiencing ongoing traumatic relationship syndrome in a dynamic with a narcissistic personality disorder in the relationship at present, how can they tap into mind, body, spirit to help heal? Is that what? Okay. Yeah. So it's the same way I was just describing there. So attending to the self, really ultimately it's self-love, because as soon as you start loving yourself, you start to see how others interact with you differently. And then you suddenly start to see that there's this kind of awareness that this is unloving, and I can choose to not allow, I can put that boundary in place. If they want to continue to be abusive, they can, but I'm not going to be present for that. It's not going to happen to me. So you're not forcing them to be a different way. That's futile. You start to realize self-love is powerful, vague, right? Because it's like, okay, how do you actually do that? And I work with clients to actually understand what that means. So it has zero to do with anything that would describe you, your education, where you're from. It has nothing to do with stories. It has to do with the fact that you are an emanation of creation itself. You are, like a ray of sun. You're an emanation. It's within you. It's the kingdom of heaven, so to speak. As Jesus said. And I don't want to preach about this. Is not just because I don't speak just what Jesus has said, but we have to respect the best symbolized messages that our guides have been guiding us throughout history. And he says the kingdom of heaven is within. Because it literally is. And so to honor that within you is a game changer. And so, like I said, it's still like the healing the lower, shame, non-forgiveness, requalifying those things. There's a process for requalifying that. So you don't try to cut it off. You actually become very intimate and close with it and understand it, and it dissolves, so to speak. So yes, when you do that, you step into love.
Thank you. I do resonate with what you just said now, because the commandment says the two greatest commandments are love the Lord with all thy heart and with all thy soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. So self is self-love, that comes first. And then when you do that, you reciprocate the love to the others. So I do understand where you're coming from.
So notice what you said. You said your point was brilliant. And also notice what you said. I want to just tie this into something. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that actually means even the person, and this is going to sound controversial, but let me explain. Even the person who's abusive, because how Jesus says, so I love this example of, when someone is in that state of being, they are being abusive because they're not recognizing their God power within. They're not recognizing the necessity for the universal balance of giving and receiving and being in harmony. They're blind to that. There's a shadow blocking them from seeing that. So here's an analogy. If someone was, I heard from somebody I listened to, if I loved it, is that if a family is at the Grand Canyon and people are admiring the view, and someone is sitting there who's blind, and he's got glasses on, and he's blind, and he's not saying anything about the magnificence of what he's witnessing, this awe and inspiration. We wouldn't say judge that person. We wouldn't say, what an idiot, how horrible is he for not seeing God, not seeing what everyone else is seeing. We would say he's blind. So the same applies to those who are abusive and who hurt us, and that sort of thing. Is they're not aware of source, but source is always there. All is existence, all is love and light. And so it's giving that energy, recognize that, bringing a positive polarity to that person, the witnessing of that person, but also choosing to keep yourself safe and keep your boundaries, self-love first.
That's why I brought up that scripture, love thy neighbor as thyself. The self is very important. If there's no self-love, then how can the other person respect your boundaries? And you have to be strong on your boundaries as well. Stick to it. That's what I tell my clients as well. Stick to your boundaries.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do, you know.
It's but baby steps. Start small and then build up from there. What do you think, listeners and viewers? Please leave your comments by email address risingaboutshadowsofabuse@gmail.com. Bye for now.